Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I am Kiersten White. I'm the author of the Paranormal Trilogy, also Mind Games, which just came out. I have another book out this fall called The Chaos of Stars, and I have 3 other books out next year. Sometimes people say, how are you writing so many books with 2 kids at home and a squatter in your stomach? And the answer is, I don't know. It's really a mystery where I find that energy. It's not a mystery, but don't tell my husband. He thinks I'm off it. So I'm really excited to be here. I actually was touring last week for Mind Games release, and I told them flat out any other event I would have said no to, but I love the Teen Author Bootcamp because I write for teens, obviously, right? Yeah, but like almost all the events are filled with adults. No offense to adults. Adults are okay. I mean, give or take. But they're boring. Yes, I am. I have to pretend to be a teenager in my head in order to be interesting. So, I love writing for teens. I love teen audiences. Teen books are my favorite books to read. So I really love being able to do the events that are engaging directly with you. So congratulations on being a teenager. It means I like you more automatically. Yes. In a perfectly legal way. I will get right to it because we don't actually have very much time. Fortunately, I can talk an hour's worth of material into 15 minutes. So today we're talking about plot like a villain, and basically what it is are tips for structuring and plotting a novel in such a way that people won't be able to put it down. My favorite thing, and this comes from years of bordering on torturous sleep deprivation from having my own kids, is I love keeping people up late, making them not study and miss tests. It's great. Plot like a villain. Obviously, I have experience. So, does that look uncomfortable? I mean, that just looks so uncomfortable, right? What does he do when he has a cold? I don't know. I mean, because how could you even, I don't know. Let's not think about the particulars of that. So, how do villains plot? Now, I'm going to be a little bit of a heretic here and say Voldemort is not an interesting villain. Wait. Because what does he want? He wants to rule the world, and in any given situation, you know what he's going to do. He's going to try to kill Harry. Period. The end. Repeatedly. And it's just, so he's ultimate bad. You know what his motivations are. You know what he's going to do in any given situation. I would argue the real interesting villain of that series was Snape, because you didn't know what his motivations were. You didn't know what he was going to give in any given situation, and you really did not know up until that last tragic memory. Who else has post-traumatic Snape disorder? Yes. You didn't know whether he was good or bad. Dumbledore insisted he was. Harry was quite sure that he wasn't, and he was a much more interesting character for it. So I'm going to give you 2 of my favorite villains. Okay, Sherlock, yes, thank you. Okay, my last session, only 5 people knew who that was, and I was like, there's something wrong with you. Those teens were defective. I'm glad you guys are not. So the BBC, there's a BBC series called Sherlock. Yes. Shockingly enough, it's about Sherlock Holmes. I know, who would have guessed? And this is Moriarty. And the thing that is interesting about Moriarty is the same thing that is interesting about Heath Ledger's The Joker, and that is when they are on the screen, you never know what they are going to do. And because you cannot anticipate what they are going to do, because they never follow A to B to C, they're so much more interesting and engaging to watch. And this is, again, a little bit of heresy. If you took The Joker out of The Dark Knight, it's not actually a very good movie. But he elevated it because he was so dynamic, and you never knew what he was going to do next, and he changed the plot in such interesting ways that he made it a much better movie than it had any right to be. And then he died. That's so sad. Don't do that. I mean, that's just jerky. So, plot like these villains. And that way you get to keep your nose, too, and you don't have to have those 2 creepy slots. So, bonus for everything. So, early decisions. As you are structuring your novel, there are several decision points, and each of those decision points are going to affect your plot and how things are going to change. First is point of view. Now, I am of the opinion that your point of view character should always be the person with the most to lose, because the stakes are the highest for them. If you pick a side character, well, obviously if they're the main character, they wouldn't be a side character, but if they ought to be a side character, they don't have as much to lose, and so it's not going to be as interesting. For example, when I was writing Mind Games is dual point of view, meaning it has two first-person point of view. Yes. And originally, I had wanted it to be a story about an impossible relationship, and I thought that relationship was going to be a romantic relationship. And so the first alternate point of view I wrote was of Adam, who is a boy. And I got about 3 pages in, and I just could not get further. And that's when I realized that his entire conversation, all of his interactions, revolved around not himself, but the other main character's sister. And I was like, oh, well, maybe she should be the main character if all they can talk about is her. And so sure enough, once I switched over to making Annie, the sister, the other point of view, everything clicked into place, and it became the story it was supposed to be. Incidentally, since the dual points of view are sisters, not a romance. I don't write that kind of book. I might win more awards if I did, but yeah, let's not go there. So your point of view should be who has the most to lose, or points of view. Another thing to think about with point of view is which voice will give you the clearest and most interesting version of your own story. So any choice that you make, you're opening up avenues and you're also closing avenues. And so if you're choosing first person, you're giving your reader an inside, in-depth, emotional view of everything that is happening. But you're only giving them a view of everything that is happening to that one singular character. So I would argue what was so compelling about the Hunger Games is that you were trapped in Katniss's head. And in her head, these snap decisions that she was making, these decisions of questionable morality, all made sense because everything boiled down to she had to survive in order to protect her sister. And I don't know if you noticed, but in the film, they had to soften that because when you didn't have her thoughts, when you didn't have the immediate justification of what was going through her head, some of her actions, when just seen without the benefit of the thoughts, would have been beyond brutal and would have made her look like a terrible person. So the voice that you do, the point of view that you do is going to change things. Whereas with third person, you can tell things that are not happening directly to your point of view. You can do omniscient, where you are seeing everything. You can do it tied to separate third person points of view. If you want a master class on how to write third person point of view with a lot of voice and with strong characterization, read Laini Taylor, Laini Taylor, like, Taylor. I get a microphone and my IQ drops like 40 points, so I'm really impressed that I was able to spell that. So she has a middle grade series called Dream Dark, and then she has a series of short stories called Lips Touched 3 Times, and then she has Daughter of Smoke and Bone, which is her new series. And she writes in third person, but it is such tight, intricate third person. Like, that's really the best example of the things that you can do with third person. So, you're making those choices. They're going to affect the different types of stories that you can do and the way that you can reveal the plot. So those are things to think about beforehand. Setting. Setting can almost act as a character. If you ever read a book that has a really dynamic setting, and you think about if it could take place anywhere else, if it can't, setting is almost a character. Have any of you read Stephanie Perkins' Anna and the French Kiss? No? Yes, good. Thank you. Good job. So I love this book, and one of the things that's great about Stephanie Perkins' writing is that her settings function as a character. And so when you think about taking that outside of the boarding school in Paris where it's set, first of all, where else would you want to go to boarding school, right? And then, but that really functions as a character, and it could not take place anywhere else. So setting can be a very, very dynamic choice if you do it right. I will admit that setting is one of my biggest struggles because I'm like, I don't care where it happens. I just want to know what happens. So, yeah, I have to work really hard on setting, but choose a setting that is dynamic, that will propel your characters forward and provide like interesting and surprising things. Font, really, really important. Font does not matter. I get a lot of questions from early writers like, what font should I use? What should the margins be? How should I? No, that doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. Get published and let your editor worry about it. So plotting in YA versus adult novels. There is a reason that I write for teenagers, and that is that adult drama is like mortgages. Have you ever gotten a mortgage? Not interesting or fun. But, teen drama, I think is really fun. It's not fun while you're in it. I'll give you that. It's awful while you're in it. I was not a happy teenager, and that's why I've chosen to write entirely about teenagers. High school was awful. I still have nightmares about it. So, I just relive it constantly in new stories. It doesn't make sense. But so I like the questions that teens face, though, because adults, you're choosing to deal with the choices that you've already made. you're going along in this life that you've already set up for yourself. But teens, it's the first time when you're really making decisions that are going to affect the rest of your life. No pressure, right? And it's the first time when you really are allowed to make those decisions. And you should be making those decisions for yourself because in the end, it is your life and you're the one who's going to have to live it. I'm not encouraging you to rebel against your parents, by the way. Don't tell them that I said that. So those are the stories that I want to tell because those are the questions that I'm interested in asking. Who am I? Who do I want to be? What are the choices that I'm making right now that are going to influence that? So a lot of times when I'm plotting a novel, when I'm going in and figuring out what story I want to tell, it's all about the questions. The questions that I'm interested in exploring and that I'm interested in asking. My book this fall is very much a family story. It's about that time, and I'm sure none of you have ever experienced this, though, when you realize your parents aren't perfect. And sometimes they mess up, and sometimes they don't love you the way that you need them to love you. And there's just that disconnect. Because, when you're a kid, your parents are your parents, right? Ultimate authority. They know what they're... Actually, my kids still don't believe that. But allegedly, I've heard that's what kids are supposed to do. And so, I want to explore that time when your parents' imperfection feels like the ultimate betrayal. And of course, in this case, her mother is literally the goddess of motherhood. So she should be good at it, but she's not. So, and then think about how different stories would be if they were for a different audience. If you could take a book and either make it for middle grade for younger readers or for young adult or for adult, like what would be the changes, what would be the shifts, what would be the different questions you would be asking with that same plot, depending on the age group that you were writing it for. I do have a few ideas that I think might work with middle grade. My first novel was middle grade. It was terrible, like really genuinely terrible. So I haven't tried again, but maybe I will someday. And I do have ideas for adults, but adults are boring and I don't want to write for them. So, the end. So as you're plotting, when you are actively moving forward with your story, if you get to a point where you're stuck, a really good question to ask yourself is, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? And then you do it. See, this is why writers are so emotionally healthy, because we can take all of these incredibly destructive, evil impulses and enact them in a completely legal way. I've killed people, guys. I mean, whoo! Well, yeah. It's good. It's good. It's good. You get it out there. And I think the worst thing that you can do, and again, sounding evil, the worst thing you can do in a story is be nice to your characters. You don't want to be nice to them. Punish them a lot. When I was writing the sequel to Mind Games, I really wanted one of the sisters to have this really empowering, positive storyline. She learns self-defense. She falls in love. She has, I didn't do anything mean to her, and it was really boring. So I had to go back and basically ruin her life. And it was a much better story for it. So sometimes you can get so attached to your characters that you only want good things for them, but that is not a good story. And I think that the happy endings that are the most rewarding are the ones that are tinged with loss. I'm going to use Twilight as an example. So, disclaimer. I really enjoyed Twilight. The first book was awesome. It was very engaging. It was, you kind of got swept along with it and everything. But what I loved was the idea of sacrifice. And she kept, hammering it in that if Bella was going to choose that life, she was going to have to sacrifice. She was going to have to sacrifice her humanity, her family, her future, any hope of having kids. What did she do in the fourth book? She had a kid. She got to keep her family. She didn't lust after human blood so much that she was a danger to everyone around her. It was like all of these consequences that had been set up got completely negated. And I don't know about you, but I wanted Bella to suffer. A lot. Yeah, and so that to me was not a good payoff, because although the ending was very, very happy, I felt like there was not enough sacrifice to justify that. So obviously I want my kids to have entirely happy endings and not have all that sacrifice and pain, but in characters, oh yeah, they should totally suffer. So, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? Do it. So next we have Baby Otter. You guys, look at his hands. Kate, sometimes when I'm sad or when people give me 2-star reviews on Amazon, I go on Tumblr and I search for pictures of baby otters and I just look at them and they make me happy inside. And actually sometimes when I'm not feeling well, I pretend like this thing in my stomach is a baby otter. Actually, I hope that it does not come out as Baby Otter because that will raise some really serious questions that I'm not prepared to deal with. Here's hoping for a human. But, so this Baby Otter is like ridiculously cute, right? What does this have to do with plotting? Absolutely nothing. Which brings me to my next point. No baby otters. When I was writing Paranormalcy, there was this one scene where Evie goes to high school. And the setup of the Paranormalcy series is that Evie is completely immersed in this paranormal world. She works for the International Paranormal Containment Agency, IPCA, not a real agency. I actually had someone ask me that once, and I was like, yeah, absolutely, it's real. And then I was not going to heaven anymore. So and she really idealized this fake version of high school that she had in her head from all those teen shows. She wanted a locker. She wanted a driver's license. She wanted all of those experiences. And so I had this whole day, 2 full chapters of her just a few hours at school. And just relishing it, comparing the mean girls to paranormal creatures, but she couldn't tase them because that's illegal, so on and so forth. And it was really fun, and I really enjoyed writing it, and I thought I had some really great, like, funny scenes and lines in there, but it did nothing to move the plot forward. It was essentially a picture of a baby otter in the middle of the book. Which, cute, fun, right? No point. So we had to get rid of the baby otter. So if every scene, every paragraph, every scene, every chapter needs to move the story forward, whether it is physically moving the story forward, things are actively happening, or there is emotional progression moving toward the ultimate resolutions. But if you do not have movement in a chapter, if things are not progressing, if new things are not revealed, that chapter does not belong and you should cut it. It's really sad to cut it. But I've often found, be like, no, I don't want to lose this scene because I have that one really great line. Oh, well, that one really great line is really easy to move somewhere else and just get rid of the rest of the scene and nobody misses it. So, yes, something must change in every scene in order to justify it. It does say always deliver information in the most interesting, engaging way possible. Look for variety. I once critiqued a book in which 90% of the conversations took place in a car, driving from one place to another. And it wasn't even a very interesting car. It was just a junker. I mean, at least it could have been doing with flying, but no. And so, try to shake things up. Try to change up the way that you deliver information. If all of your key information is delivered in backstory or monologue, figure out a different way to do it. Shake things up. Again, surprise your readers. Do things in unexpected ways because it will make it more interesting. And then, let the point of view pull its own weight. Make the point of view work for you. If it's a first person, make sure that it's engaging and that it's emotionally charged. If it's third person, bring in the extra information that you wouldn't be able to have otherwise. It's all about the details, except when it's not. So I found that when I was a beginning writer, I thought I needed to do a ton of details for things. I couldn't trust my reader to fill in the blanks. So I needed to tell you how tall they were, what color eyes they had, what color their hair was, what tone their skin was, what their clothes looked like. Have you ever read a book where they have to tell you that the protagonist stopped and grabbed an apple on her way to school because she was hungry, and then she gets to school, and she puts her stuff in her locker, and she goes to class? If you start out with a scene with the character in the morning, and then she's in class, are your readers going to be like, oh my gosh, she can transport? No! They're going to assume that your character got ready, ate breakfast, somehow managed to get to school in a manner that was not a flying car nor magic transportation, and then they were in class when you picked up with them again. You don't have to hold your reader's hand through it. Now, if it helps you when you're writing a first draft to go through everything that happens, that's totally fine. But when you're editing, you need to realize that it's okay to make those leaps. Your reader's going to follow along with you. I would also say that tiny brush strokes are more effective than just plastering color all over the page. Your reader will fill it in. You give them a few details. You give them what the character's like. They're going to fill in the rest for themselves. Nothing annoys me more as a reader when I feel like the writer does not trust me to imagine their world correctly. I read a fantasy novel recently where it took them 10 pages to walk from the tavern to the docks. And it was not a long walk. And it took 10 pages. And he repeatedly had to describe the airships in the sky and the pollution. There was a mention of this specific type of pollution in every single paragraph, to the point where it could have, been a soda drinking game, because we don't drink anything other than soda, right? So, And as a reader, I don't like that. I like writers to trust me to fill in the blanks. So trust your readers. Let them fill in the details for themselves. Backstory. Now, this is something that takes a while to learn. My first novel was a middle grade novel about two kids who go back in time to save King Tut. Sounds pretty awesome, right? No, it wasn't. It was incredibly boring. Actually, I'm kind of proud of it because I think it showed real talent to make a book that boring. It was a skill because it was almost impossible to make it entirely boring, but I did. And I'm proud of that. So the entire first chapter of this book that I was hoping for 10-year-olds to read was the 10-year-old main character thinking back on the months-long, drawn-out process of his mother dying of cancer. Totally fun for 10-year-olds, right? What 10-year-old doesn't want to read an entire chapter of a mom dying of cancer? Awesome. No, not awesome. And I felt like it was really important for them to understand the character and understand where he was coming from. They needed to know what he had been through. But no, you start out with a character, you give hints about who they are, and then as the story progresses, you let the backstory reveal itself as answers. And it fills in those gaps for the reader, and it's oh, that's why he reacts so strongly to that. Or, oh, that's why she's scared of things like that, So it should inform the present, not steal from it. If you have to bring your plot and your I can talk. This is why I write. It's much easier. If you have to bring your plotting to a grinding halt in order to insert backstory, you're not doing it right. Even backstory should keep the momentum going forward. There's another thing that I really dislike as a reader. Have you ever read a book where the girl was walking down the street and she looked on the side and saw a boy who reminded her so much of, no, she wasn't going to think about it. Really? He reminded you so much of that and you instantly thought, no, I must not think of that because then it will spoil it for my readers and I need to draw that out for a lot longer. No, it's a cheat. Don't cheat. It's total cheating. If your character is going to think about something, they'll think about it. So don't withhold backstory as a way of artificially creating tension. You should be creating questions for your reader, but you should also be giving them answers as you go along. If you spread the backstory throughout and do give them answers as they go along, obviously withholding the awesomest answers for the end, it keeps the mystery going. And trust your readers to trust you. You have time. If you're working with a novel, you have time to give them this information and to release it and to let that character grow. So even backstory needs to move the plot forward. Pace yourself. I'm not going to make a running analogy because running is the worst. Oh man, it's the worst, right? But I'm assuming when you're running, you can't just start out as fast as possible because then you're not going to be able to go for very long. This is what I've heard about running anyway. I wouldn't know. But so pace yourself, pace your reveals. Don't front load your book with all of your most awesome scenes and biggest mysteries and everything because then you're going to get to the middle and you'll realize you have nothing left. So pace yourself. Make sure that you're asking questions at the beginning. You're giving little answers here and there, but they're answers that are interesting and almost raise more questions. How many of you watched the TV show Lost? Yeah, okay. Lost. So here's what they did. They set up these awesome mysteries. And every single episode was oh my gosh, what does that mean? I'm so excited to find out what those stupid numbers mean. Or why there's a polar bear on the island. Did you ever find out? No, you did not. You invested 7 seasons of your television watching life into that show, and they gave you no answers. I'm still bitter, J.J. Abrams. And then they gave him Star Trek and Star Wars? Come on, guys. Joss Whedon. Just go with Joss. Anyway, so Lost was so frustrating because I invested a lot as a participant, as a viewer, and then there was no payoff. There was no reward. They asked question after question after question, built mysteries, and then they had no real way to resolve it. So don't be lost. Ask questions, build mysteries, but then answer them and give your reader a payoff because you're asking them to invest a lot of time and creativity and their brain space. Essentially you're renting their brain for a few hours. I like renting your brains, by the way. They're excellent and very well furnished. And then don't forget, questions are not the only thing that can create tension. Sometimes the greatest tension you can give is an answer. Because that can then change the way that your character sees everything. You're a wizard, Harry. Everything changes. So, no one ever said that. Well, and they wouldn't call me Harry anyway, but I would go by Harry if it meant I got to be a wizard. Okay, so now we're going to go on to just very technical things. And these are things that can slow your plot down. The invisible dialogue tag. So, Kiersten said, even though you already knew she was talking, sometimes in dialogue, she paused. We feel like we need to tag it too often to make sure that our readers know what we are saying, Kiersten said with a sly wink. No, you knew that I was talking. You don't need dialogue tags to know that I'm talking. If you have a conversation between two people, and it's going back and forth between the two people, if you denote who's talking in the first two paragraphs, your reader's going to assume that it's every other paragraph, and they're going to know who's talking. Another way to get around using dialogue tags is to attach an action to the dialogue. So like, if you have several people talking, you could say, James slammed his fist on the table. I don't want to do that, So you attach it to an action, and then you could get rid of the dialogue tag. Also, my apologies to second grade teachers everywhere. Those creative dialogue tags, no. Cajoled, murmured, exclaimed. No, you don't use them. 95% of your dialogue tags should be asked or said, and that's because your dialogue should speak for itself. Does anybody get that joke? I really liked that one. I probably should kill it. So dialogue should speak for itself, meaning that the things that your characters are saying should be clear and powerful enough that you don't need to tell us how they are saying them. Like, we should know that they're shouting something or that they're angrily muttering something by the content of the dialogue itself. Sentence pacing and variation is your friend. If you're writing action scenes and something is happening right then, keep your sentences short and powerful and punchy. If you're writing description, they can be longer. Just have the sentence, if you can, reflect the type of information that it's giving. Watch out for word ticks and unnecessary framing. For example, if you're writing in first person, I always notice that I do things like, I looked across the room and I noticed that a man came in. Well, if it's first person, we know that you're looking across the room and you're noticing things. So you really could just say, a man came in. Because we know who's doing the scene. You don't need to frame it for us. Also, word ticks. I just really like the word just. It just works in just about every situation just perfectly. I have to cut like 400 of them from every manuscript. So if you find you're using words repetitively or kind of as a crutch instead of a more specific word, yeah, you shouldn't. Avoid superfluity in language, observations, and even characters. Using the Anne and the French Kiss, which not enough of you have read. Again, as an example, originally when she was writing it, there was a character who existed solely to be another character's girlfriend. Like, she had no role other than to be awkwardly kissing this boy in many scenes. And Stephanie realized that person was not a character, she was a prop, essentially. And there was another character, Rashmi, who was very dynamic and interesting. And so the girlfriend got killed. Not literally, she just got taken out of the manuscript. Like she never even existed. You have so much power as a writer. And she made Rashmi the girlfriend because then the relationship was dynamic and not just this girl exists for the sole purpose of kissing that boy, which would be a really sad existence, unless he was a really good kisser. So, Moriarty encourages you to go forth and plot fiendishly. Think about your decisions. Always keep the momentum going and surprise your reader. 5 minutes? Okay, awesome. So we have 5 minutes. I would love for you to ask me questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to show you more pictures of baby otters. Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay, she was asking, how do you avoid confusion when you are doing invisible dialogue tags? I think just make it clear, and also this is where beta readers come in very handy, because as the author, you know exactly who is talking and what everyone is saying, and it makes sense to you. So this is why you need critique partners, because they are the ones who will say, I don't know who's talking right here, because, it can be confusing. So critique partners are really important, and just making sure that, if you do have a conversation between 3 people, you need to have more dialogue tags. You just do. So it's always a balance. Other questions? Yes. So coming up with a climax, that is a really good question. I generally work from the beginning. I have the end in mind. I don't usually know how I'm going to get there. I would just say make sure that the stakes are high enough. Make sure that the potential for loss is really devastating. Yes. And just try and build in enough minor elements that when they all come together, it will look like you knew what you were doing all along and you're really a genius, even though you're probably not. If you're me. Yes?
What is the best way to make a character die, in your opinion?
Kill them. Well, have you read Mind Games? I killed someone with a chair. That's a really terrible scene. Like, it's a genuinely awful scene. And my editor, when she was editing it, she writes in purple pen, and she had a smiley face next to it, and she wrote, "Love this!" And I was like, you're even more disturbing than I am. So I don't know, like, I think that it needs to be shocking. I think it also needs to serve a point. I mean, unless you're writing a slasher novel, you don't want to just have, like, this huge body count. If you are writing a slasher novel, then by all means, kill a lot of people. But just make sure that it has an impact and that there's a reason for it and that it's done in an interesting way. Yeah, don't just randomly kill everyone. Although my husband in every single book does tell me to kill the main character. Yes?
Is it better, like, if you're the villain in your book, like, let's say they're very classy and elegant, would it be better for them to kill their victims fast and painless or quick and painful?
Quick and painful or fast and painless? You guys are better villains than I am, apparently. I don't actually think that much about killing my characters. But again, it needs to serve a purpose, and if you're trying to establish how evil someone is, the death needs to reflect that. Yes. Any more questions about killing people? Yikes. Yes. A good villain is someone or something that is in direct opposition to the goals of the main character. And oftentimes, a villain is not even necessarily a character. Your villain in the novel can also be a part of the main character. Some novels don't have like an actual physical villain. It's your main character and these parts of themselves that are warring with the things that they actually want and want to get. So the most interesting villains are the ones who are in direct opposition to the ultimate goals for happiness of the main character. Okay, I think we are out of time. Yes. But don't stand up yet. Just kidding. Thank you so much for coming and good luck with your writing.